Welcome everyone, we're back again for today's Love Transformation class, and today I'm joined all the way from the UK by the beautiful Ismene. She's a transformational coach and former therapist, and I just love her perspective on love. And today we're going to be talking about facing fears and really connecting with what our heart desires, and this is going to get pretty real and pretty raw and pretty vulnerable. Welcome, hun.
Oh, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yay. So one of the things that you've experienced working with clients as both a therapist and a coach is how much we're held back on really manifesting our dreams and creating what it is that we really want out of life, not just in our love life, but in all areas of our life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So really connecting with our deepest desires. So I think there's sometimes a bit of a confusion between what we want and what we need and what actually lights us up and what our heart really, really deeply desires. So yeah, that's the work that I love doing, helping people gain that clarity of finding that deeper journey inward. Yeah.
And with plenty of time to reflect on our life so far and what's happening at the moment and what our future will potentially look like. Again, a lot of us are going back to the drawing board, and I love that you're going to sort of share with us some real useful tools in how to make the most out of connecting with those desires. But before we dive into that, let's talk a little bit about what's been holding us back.
First of all, getting clarity. So when we want something or deeply desire something, quite often people will jump the step of going inward and getting clarity. So for example, I'm looking for a relationship, so they'll just jump online and go dating. But the problem is, if we don't really know what it is that we want, we take action that isn't aligned with our deepest values, and then we keep attracting what we don't want. And then what starts to happen is then the fears that we have, or these old stories that no longer work for us, keep getting entrenched, and they get stronger and stronger and stronger. So I'll give you a really good example of a live example from me. I always used to believe that what I wanted in a relationship was a corporate guy, and he needed to wear a suit, and he needed to be on this financial path. But actually what I discovered through this inner work was what my deep desire was: to be with a guy who could meet me in a heart space, who had a real sense of purpose, and that would understand that in me, and that we could build a life together. Whoa, how completely different that is. And can you see how we can get really, really lost when we don't know what it is that we really, really want? Because we just keep repeating the same patterns. So that's definitely the first stage that people skip, and then gets us into problems.
So how did you come to that realization that what you thought you wanted and what you really, really deeply desired were two different things? How did you even realize that in the first place?
I went through an absolutely huge breakup, and I was feeling really, really heartbroken and in a lot of pain, and really thinking, what the hell happened to my life? Because when we're going through heartbreak, we're thinking we're grieving from the past, we're grieving for our present self, but we're also grieving for our future self. And I just thought, right, this is a pattern for me. There's something that isn't quite working, and I wasn't prepared to keep going on and on, having the same experience and having to go back to this heartbreak. And I think what that did was invite me to suddenly go inward and say, okay, let me be really clear then. If this isn't what is making me happy, what is it that I really, really value? And then I started to go through that process. And then the second process, which we'll go on to, was that I allowed myself to go into my beliefs. I allowed myself to look at the patterns and go into the fears that I had around love. And then once I kind of started to shift that, it became really clear what I needed to do that was different, which is the transformation, which is rewriting the story, which is learning to choose a different reality. So it was a big process, but a really important one, and had actually nothing to do with dating other people or being in partnership with anyone else. I allowed myself the time to be single and build a relationship with me.
we all, to some degree, I think, have this fear of perhaps not being enough or not being
Mm,
worthy of having this incredible relationship that deep down we might really desire.
mm,
Let's talk about, and we can circle back to the techniques for really getting clarity about what that is, but I'm keen to talk about what some of those common fears are, and
mm.
how do we know if it's those fears that are actually holding us back, especially if we've had them for a really long time.
Yeah, because that's who we believe that we are.
Right.
So yeah, so I think what I see the deepest fears that are always kind of blocking relationship or blocking deep partnership is this fear of vulnerability. That if people see me for all that I am, then I won't be loved, that I won't be sexy, that I won't be wanted, that people won't stay. So that's something that I see a lot in my work, this real fear of vulnerability and being who we really are, not who we've been taught to be. So I think that's a really big one, because how can we be in deep relationship with someone else when we're trying to be someone else? So I guess things we go into what I would understand as a therapist is like an adaptive self. So I will be who you want me to be rather than who I really am. So things like finding it hard to ask for what we want. Yeah, so knowing it is one thing, but the second stage, of course, is how do we ask for what we want and need? We might be going along with other people's timings and plans. We might be overly giving. Or on the other hand, I also see people that, fears of like engulfment, and then they would be having really, really kind of overly strict boundaries, or if anyone is showing any kind of form of vulnerability, then they're off. So we might see these behaviors when it actually becomes really hard just to stay in the moment, go with the flow, not needing to control things, allowing things to kind of unfold, because fear comes in and then we go into a reactive place rather than just sinking in and allowing things in the present moment. So that's kind of a classic of what fear will do. We'll either give too much or too little, is control. Yeah.
On some level, it almost feels more tolerable for someone to reject us if they're rejecting our false self, the self that we're presenting to that person, rather than being really vulnerable and being rejected for showing the deepest essence of ourself, right?
Yeah. But then the real sadness is, and I think this is far more the risk, what we risk when we try and be someone else, or what we perceive the other person needs or wants of us, is that we may never have an opportunity of that deep bliss of being loved for who we really are. And for me, and that's the tricky thing about fear, it tells us that it's protecting us, and on some level it's trying our best. It is a friend that's developed somewhere that said, this is a safer way of being. It is actually trying to be our friend. But I think the reframe happens when we say, but what is this fear costing me? So actually in the protection, what actually happens is it's a limit. We don't get to be our whole selves. We don't get to have the experience, which is very healing if we've had previous experience where we haven't felt that that's being our truth. To really be loved and come from that place of being all that we are, because then that affects everything. Our friendships, our career, our purpose, our gifts in the world, how we can share. So for me, it's very, very important, if you're really passionate about living out your purpose and your calling, we've got to start with the relationship with ourselves, the relationship with others, and then the relationship with the world. It's so interlinked.
How much do you see social conditioning and media and cultural conditioning kind of playing into this sort of false self, or this person that we feel like we need to be, sassy and have a certain look and act a certain way and own certain things and all of that?
In a way, to peel back the layers and to have these really authentic, meaningful, conscious relationships, with everyone, but also with partners, it's almost this process of letting go of the conditioning of who you think that you should be and who you've been told that you are. And we're going to have had lots of experiences where people have misunderstood us, where they've criticized us. We felt different, we felt too much, we felt not enough. So actually, I feel that this is about peeling back the layers of our families, of our conventional education system. It's all about other people's ways, other people's facts. Yet what is so unique and beautiful and sexy and gorgeous and sensual is that there is no one else like us. But that takes quite a shift in thinking and feeling, because it's a different belief system than quite often what we're told.
It's really interesting when we're asked to do exercises or journal and describe ourselves and describe our best qualities, how difficult it is to self-reflect in that way, right? And so I guess that's the same thing, appreciating our own uniqueness, that there is no one else like me, is quite difficult.
Well, again, here's the fear. So it's always the fear. If we actually just simplified it into why is it that we find it hard to show up and be ourselves in whatever context? Why do we find it hard to be in our hearts and connect from that place? And it's all this fear of, I'll be attacked, I'll be misunderstood, I'll be rejected, and this does really feed into things that are very primal of our primal brain, that years ago, we're tribes people effectively, that we need people, that we have a deep desire for belonging and recognition and affection. So it's, to a certain extent, a natural fear to worry about these things. But when we start to understand that and we say, okay, why is it that we are being blocked here? And this is a fear, we get just a chance to separate from it for a moment and say, okay, this is a fear, this is a thought, this is a belief system, this is not who I am. And in that separation, it creates a bit of relief, because then we get to say, we are a powerful, magnetic, beautiful being. I get to choose what my reality is now. And we can either become enmeshed in that, or we can choose for something else to be our reality. We can choose to love our fear and acknowledge it and respond to it, and then say, I choose something different. I choose to support myself. I choose to believe in myself. I choose to treat myself like I matter. And then we start to become a match to what we really deeply desire.
How would you suggest that we develop an awareness perhaps of what these fears are?
I think it's just initially noticing, slowing everything down, because, particularly with these patterns, they've been running for such a long time that they're so unconscious. The first thing that we might be aware of them is that we're reacting or we're in a behavior. But if we can just slow it down and just notice, okay, I just flipped out there, that I'm feeling not okay. And then we can just start to go backwards a little bit and say, okay, so what was it that triggered me there? And then you go, okay, so it was this guy didn't text me back. And then you would just slow that down again. Okay, so what am I making that mean? How am I thinking about that? And then you get clear on that, and then just moving in, how is that making me feel? Frightened, insecure, needy, jealous, whatever it is. And again, doing it with non-judgment, but then just noticing, okay, how might I start to shift that? But first of all, we've got to know what is going on. And most people are not aware of that because it's so quick and it's so unconscious and it's so normal and familiar for us.
I love that process. So I hope that our audience goes back and hits pause and takes notes on that one in particular. One of the things that I notice with a lot of single women is excuses, right? And everyone's flavor of excuses is a bit different. So I don't have time. I hate online dating. I won't do it. I live in an area where there's no decent men. I'm this, I'm that. I've just got to, lose 5 kilos before I'll feel confident enough. There's always a myriad of excuses, right? And I believe that underneath that is really some fears. Right. So for anyone listening who's resonating with the fact that, yeah, maybe I have excuses too, how perhaps can they sort of get underneath those excuses, those false beliefs, you might call them, and kind of excavate out those fears in order to work through them?
So just a really easy way of really getting underneath that is look at the excuse, write it down, and then ask yourself, how does this serve me? What does it protect me from? How might fear, if it was my best friend, how might they be supporting me? You know, so one of them is, I'm too old, or like, I hate online dating. And you go, okay, so cool, like that's what I believe, but how is this protecting me? And then you just keep going, how is this protecting me? How is this protecting me? How is this protecting me? And actually, as you go deeper and deeper and deeper, eventually you'll get to the core of it. If you just keep asking yourself the same question in a journal, or even ask a friend to support you in this journey, therapist, coach, whatever, you get down to the core feeling. So it might be just, let's just go through that quickly. I don't want to go on online dating. Okay, so how that might be protecting me. It makes me feel really uncomfortable because I don't know what to say. How is that protecting me? And then eventually you might get down to, I'm scared I'm going to be rejected and I'm not good enough. So all of a sudden then you get past the excuses, you get past the wants, you get past the false beliefs, and actually you realize, okay, what I really need from this is reassurance that I am good enough. And then I can start to tell myself a different story. I'm good enough. It's exciting to hang out and meet different guys. And I'm really enjoying this journey of becoming a woman that I need to meet a partner. And then we start to create the momentum and a new belief system. Every time that I speak to a guy, I'm feeling more confident. I'm building up the skills that I need. But we need to know what that core feeling is so that we can give her the support that she needs, and also to move past the fear.
And for the women that have been actively dating and gotten to that stage where they are putting themselves out there, up until we've been, most of us in self-isolation, of course, but we've, you know, throughout the course of this series, we're also discussing how beautiful opportunity it is to get online as well. But what I notice is a lot of women will have a go, will start to make some connections, maybe even meet someone, but be very sensitive to if that gentleman's not interested, or like you said before, if he doesn't text back or it doesn't go anywhere. And then sort of that confidence is then reeled back in and they retreat back in, not having a lot of resilience for the fact that sometimes dating is like, we do have to have resilience and tolerance to people maybe not necessarily being as interested back as we are in them. What might we be able to do in order to build up some resilience in order to continue to put ourselves out there in the face of rejection?
Gorgeous question, and something I feel really passionate about. First and foremost, we have to improve the relationship with ourselves. So resilience comes from us. So whilst we may deeply desire a relationship, the deepest desire is to feel amazing in yourself. So if we're feeling really empty or hungry or lacking in confidence, then when we have rejection in any contact, maybe doesn't contact again, or maybe the person that we want to be with doesn't want to be with us, if we're not really full up within ourselves, we take it personally, and then it can erode our confidence because we're not filling ourselves up. We're almost giving the power of our confidence to someone else. And this is the really juicy bit. No one can take anything away from you if you are giving it to yourself. How can we be rejected? It's just a choice. It's just someone's choice. So again, there's the fear. If I'm rejected and somehow it diminishes me. How about, ladies, we just say, nothing can diminish me. We can only just have experiences. And I think this all comes down to the core bit of this, which is self-love. Fill yourself up. Be the partner that you need. Give yourself the pleasure and the time and the gifts and the reassurance. And then whatever we go after becomes an experience, and it can be fun or not so fun, but it doesn't diminish us. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes absolute sense. It's beautiful. And as you were talking, I got goosebumps, in fact, and it reminded me of a saying that no one else's opinion of me is more important than my opinion of me.
Because it's reframing what fear wants to tell us. What is rejection? you know, it means that someone doesn't want me. Is that actually true? You know, we also have to get into this habit of really challenging what we believe. Just because we think it doesn't make it true. Actually, it could just be, it's just choice. This person chooses to do this or not. We don't have to create an entire story about it, about our own worthiness. And I think that's when we can really enter in this beautiful, conscious relating, when we start to realize these thoughts and these feelings, I'm doing this to myself, it's not them.
Yeah.
And that's the freedom. And how fun then dating or being in a relationship can be, or even being single, when we just realize everything that we do and experience can be personal growth.
Yeah. I think another antidote to that feeling of worrying about being rejected or being sensitive to getting hurt as well is also dating from a place that's not necessarily waiting for the other person to choose us, right?
Yes.
That's where we're going to, I guess, dive in a little bit deeper now. That often happens is because we don't have that absolute clarity on who's the right match. We're just showing up hoping that someone's going to like us and pick us, and putting all the power in their hands in terms of making a decision about whether this connection moves forward or not.
Yeah, that's really, really important. In anything that we do, I mean, what we're talking about is love here, but this is across the board. We don't want to be creating experiences because we don't feel enough. So, or, you know, so it's really the not only knowing what we deeply desire, but also being very intentional about, I call it inspired action. So taking action from a place that is aligned with what feels good. So what feels good is saying, I really want to interact and hang out with a man or a woman, whatever the preference is, that I feel seen by, I feel respected by. Already that creates a safe boundary, and it creates an intention. And then that makes it easy to take inspired action. Because already we're saying, okay, so if I go out on a date with someone and I don't feel that they've seen me, and I don't feel that they're that interested in me, and I didn't feel that respected or honored, guess what? My inspired action is, I'm not going to choose to hang out with this person again. So it's also a way for us to keep our integrity, our dignity, and our self-worth. If we go from this point of, I really need a relationship, I'm feeling really lonely, and we go without any kind of internal boundaries, anything, we're going to accept anything. And then it's going to really matter if they text us back. It's going to really matter if they call, because our self-worth is on the line. And that's a very, very vulnerable place to put ourselves. That's actual real vulnerability. Because then they respond, we're going to feel amazing. And then they don't respond, we're going to feel awful. You know, I get that. I lived my life like that for a really long time. So like, I really say that with love and care, because it's horrible when we feel like that. I really want to honor that. So I'm saying that as a professional, but I'm also really saying that as a woman to another woman. It's awful. And I know what it also feels like when we really love and respect ourselves and create these internal boundaries about what is okay, an okay way to treat us too. And it feels so much better and safer and nurturing. Yeah.
I think most of us have had an experience or can relate to being hurt and disappointed and let down by a guy or a potential partner that we actually didn't really like that much in the first place, right? That was not even really probably a good match for us, but somehow we got caught up in it and it felt good for a time. And then when they stepped away or pulled back or weren't interested anymore, it leaves your self-esteem in tatters sometimes.
Yeah, and I think what we do is we keep repeating the past. So obviously, if we kind of had a childhood where we believed that love was hard to come by, or that we weren't accepted for who we really are, then of course we are going to go towards what is familiar. So it's also having the compassion for ourselves of saying, okay, so this is a pattern for me. It's painful for me. I'm not consciously choosing this, but what's that about? It's getting really curious. Why is this my baseline? Why do I keep being attracted to guys or women or whatever it is that can't meet me. And I think that's where we can start to do this personal inquiry work, because we will always seek to repeat what is familiar, even if it's painful, because it's what's known.
We had a chat earlier about how relationships really are the biggest mirror to that inner work, or perhaps patterns that we've had from childhood, or behavioral dynamics. What are some of the common ones that you see?
So do you know what, I think it's quite, I mean, because we're all humans, so we have really common ones, but I think it's also really personal too. So for things like attracting people that are unavailable, or being really scared to commit, or being really scared, like we started at the beginning, to be all that we are, because these can bring up some really intense feelings for people. So we can also be scared of what is good. We can always be scared of what is good. We can almost be scared of having our best relationship and having someone really love and see us and show up for us, because it's like, well, I don't know how to do this, and we fear what is unknown. So we fear the pain. Yeah, we're driven away from the pain, and we're also driven towards pleasure, but we can also be scared of pleasure if that's not our familiar. And again, not a lot of people talk about that. I mean, I think we all understand that if it hurts, we go, oh, or we perceive that it's going to hurt. But there's a really interesting, juicy part in this as well, and this is what I'm working with, helping people reach their potential. Mostly, do you know what? I deal with people's fear of success. Do you know that? That's the main body of work that I do. They're so terrified of getting what they want, Pata.
In the context of relationships, why might that be, do you think?
They're scared they're going to lose it. They're going to have what they finally want, and then it's going to go away. That big one, painful for people, painful, because they know how to survive, but to know what it's like to thrive and then lose it, oh, the grief, right? So that's a massive one. That could be the same with money, anything. Another one is it brings up a lot of fears about inadequacy and whether I'm worthy. So they find this like really like amazing partner. It's like, maybe I'm not worthy of this. Maybe they're too good for me. And it makes people feel insecure, really. But again, beautiful mirror, carry on with your self-worth there, because you are worthy, because you've attracted it. But you know, there is work to be done there. And I think another one is sometimes it can bring up competition anxiety. If we really have something that we really, really want, and then it's like, well, other people are going to want this, and maybe they'll go off with other people. So again, it's this other thing of looping back with the loss, but it does tend to be slightly different.
One of the interesting things that I notice with most women actually is when we meet someone of the sex that we're attracted to, so say a man, for example, but we decide that we're not interested in him, or he's not our ideal partner, and we friend zone him. And then we're just completely ourselves because we don't really care what he thinks. We have no interest in his judgment. It's just, isn't it really ironic and interesting that it's those guys that be so enamored and so it's often those guys that genuinely then become interested because they get the real and more authentic self.
Yeah.
But we find it more difficult to do that when it's someone that we're attracted to or see as a potential partner.
Yeah, absolutely, because it matters in a way that, you know, and it's also a matter of being secure, isn't it? Like with our friends, we're like, we love you, you love me, cool. Yeah, so it's almost the fear again, isn't it? Fear, may I add, of losing this person. So it's almost like we feel, again, remember going back into this adaptive self, then maybe we need to be more of this or this in order to keep them because they really care. So another point to put here as well, which is really, really important, our fears will get greater the deeper we are in relationship with others to start off with. You'll notice that when we first attract someone and it's quite a superficial connection, you know, it might be a little bit of fear, but actually the deeper that we go, the more that it matters, then this is where the old fears will start to surface. Now, this is not anything to be frightened of. That is when the inner work starts. That is when sacred conscious partnership starts. That is when the healing starts. Whereas a lot of people get very frightened of that stage because they go, well, it was so cool, we're in the honeymoon stage and now it's deepening. And all of a sudden, all this stuff that I thought I dealt with is coming to the surface. But that's when it gets juicy. That's when the transformation happens. Actually really invite that stage.
There are ways to prepare somewhat for that, though.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, again, it's just starting, it's incremental. So I'm not into going from like 0 to 1,000, it's too overwhelming. So remember, if you've been starting to practice this right from the moment before you even date, if that's where you are, you can prepare yourself for being in this deep relationship through just using it when you, just by noticing, this guy I don't really care about so much, and how am I feeling about myself? And this guy I'm more interested in, it's bringing this. What's that about? So actually, by the time we've actually met someone that we really feel in deep relationship with, we're already in this process of using it for growth and fulfilling ourselves and filling ourselves up, so that by then we've actually got an awful lot of resilience, and it's just, we're ready, we're prepared. I think that's a really beautiful word. We can use everything to help us.
Isn't it interesting that relationships can be so desirable and so exciting, yet so scary, and push us so much out of our comfort zone all in one? It's just, it's super juicy. And I guess that's why I'm so drawn to working in this field. You had some really beautiful tips about how to connect in and really, really access your deepest desires. So it can be almost like a guiding light for your decisions around who to invest time in getting to know. And as we talked about earlier in our conversation, a lot of times we don't have absolute clarity about that.
And I think that's absolutely okay. Just see clarity as opening a door and then allowing it to evolve. Just by opening the door and being in the intention of wanting to know what we deeply desire, already we've started.
In a practical sense, you've developed a soul journey experience that supports being able to really activate this more. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I love doing it. So for me, again, I'm really big into experiential learning. So whilst we can really like kind of share knowledge and experience, and I think that's really helpful, and tools, there's nothing quite like actually experiencing these shifts ourselves. And so I've kind of developed this soul journey, which is kind of part visualization, part kind of sacred sound, and we go deep into a journey of our own heart and get really clear on what our desire is, get really clear on what our stories are. But it also gives a real chance to feel and release our fears, forgive ourselves, forgive whatever circumstances it was that's made us come to where we are. And then start to rewrite the future for what we want to move towards, what is in our deepest, highest interest. So I really love doing that. People, very powerful, very healing.
Beautiful, beautiful. And thank you so much for making this experience available for our audience. You can click the button below the video today to access Ismene's soul journey. Whew, that's really powerful. I can already feel and connect into the energy of that experience. So thank you so much for sharing that. Is there anything else you'd like to share or speak to before we close up the session today?
I think it's just to send a final message of hope that wherever you are on your journey, whatever feels like your current reality or your current truth is, you know, we all have it within us to have beautiful, deep, satisfying, fulfilling relationships. And it's just a matter of shifting and healing and transcending our fears. But love is there and it's available to all of us.